Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I got something a little special. It's a review, a normal review, but it is the start of my fantasy bingo. If you don't know anything about fantasy bingo, the r/fantasy subreddit on Reddit does a bingo every single year where if you read certain books, they can fulfill different squares, and if you fill up the entire bingo board, then you officially win. There are no prizes. It's just more of like a your own personal thing. You can set your own goals. You can change some of those squares if you want to. Really, the challenge is however you make it. I decided to at least try this year because I've been in the reading mood. It's funny that I'm saying that now because actually in the last week I haven't really read that much. But before that, I've actually been reading a lot more. So I decided, you know what, let's broaden my horizons a little bit in the fantasy genre and let's try to get some of those squares completed. Um, this square that I decided to go for first was pretty easy. I was going to do it regardless, but I decided to go for the hard mode a little bit. It wasn't too hard because I kind of do this naturally. But the square that I'm going to talk about today is the book. I have to read a book that was published in 2024, and the hard mode is the book has to be the debut novel for the author, and I accomplished both of those because today I am reviewing The Other Valley by Scott Alexander Howard. Lovely cover. I saw early reviews for it, like I want to say back in January or even December of last year, one of those 2 months, and it really intrigued me. Really, the plot and the synopsis got me even more excited for this book. So I'll tell you a little bit about it. I think that again, the plot is going to be what draws a lot of people to this novel. It is speculative fiction. It isn't like the most uh, fantasy heavy book out there, but I'm still going to count it for my square. If anybody objects, then I think I can easily find another book that fits the square. But the Other Valley is quite simply just about a village of unknown time or unknown, I guess, location is in the middle of a valley, and on either side of this village is another version of the village. On one side, the village is 20 years in the future, and on the other side, the village is 20 years in the past, while our main characters live in the present. And apparently, this village stretches on and on and on for eternity. So, as you move from one village to the other, you move at 20-year intervals. And I thought, wow, that sounds very interesting. I am going to read that. And so I bought it um, like 2 months ago, and I finally got around to reading it. But it was okay. I'll go ahead and spoil my review already. It was just okay. But why that is, it's very important to talk about. I think the plot again was the best part. Very interesting. It reminded me a lot of, as I was reading this book, it reminded me a lot of The Giver, at least the early parts of it. This book is broken up into two parts, and part one definitely had The Giver vibes, where it was very, I thought the tone was pretty great. It was very slow and meandering, but very purposeful with that. And I thought it was great. It was really, uh, again, slow pace, but I loved getting to know the characters. I love getting to know the society, the village, all the ins and outs of it. And I thought that was, uh, great moments all throughout of part one. It was a very quiet book um, where you're really trying to pay attention to all the little moments, all the little details during part one. I thought that was great. If you're into those kind of reads where you really just take your time with the book, you sit, you look at the beautiful lines, because there are a lot of beautiful lines and beautiful sentences in this book. If you try to pick those apart, those are great. And you just, absorb yourself into this novel uh, in the writing. It's great for that. You'll have plenty of time because it does move a little bit slower, but not too slow. I thought that was great. I also loved. If you see the lights flickering, I need to get my light bulb changed. Oh well, I'll get it changed eventually. But another great moment for me, I really enjoyed the themes that were, being uh, toyed around with in this book. More about the plot. If you don't want to know about this, it's on the blurb, so I don't think it's a major spoiler. But really, our main character, and all of the characters' names I think are French. I don't speak French. I never took French. I took Russian. So I can't really pronounce them. I apologize. I'm not the best, and I don't listen to audio. But our main character, our protagonist, she lives a pretty comfortable life. She is, again, why it reminds me of The Giver as well is because part one, we follow a bunch of teenagers as they're getting ready to graduate and enter their internships and their apprenticeships. Oh gosh, that's weird to say sometimes. But they're getting ready to become apprentices as well. And our protagonist is trying to become a council member, and they get to decide who gets to cross the border one way or the other to see 20 years in the future or 20 years in the past. And most of the time, people want to do that to see a loved one who has passed. And really, the whole conflict of this book, it deals with our protagonist, one of her good friends that she makes in the early parts, is slated to die, and she only learns that by complete accident, and she has to let it happen, or all of the future villages will collapse and no longer exist, and you don't want that to happen. And I thought that was really great. Again, the plot really pulls this novel along, but I did find like the themes that I almost forgot his name. That the themes that Mr. Howard was exploring, I thought those were great. Grief, what happens to us when we experience, something catastrophic, and how we come together as a community, and how it affects different characters. Because our protagonist is not the only character or only person who is affected by this event, or by the knowledge of this event as well. I'm not going to give too much away. I thought that was great. Just talking about grief. And really the effects of grief and what it has on people. The effects of time, looking forward into the future. How do you deal with your goals, and how do you deal with your mortality? How do you deal with looking back in time and trying to explore that as well? I thought all of that was great. It's a very thoughtful book. Awesome. And how do we come together as a group, as a group of friends, or a village, or society, when tragedy happens as well. All of those moments are fantastic. I also want to point out another great moment. Again, this deals with, I don't want to say time travel, but I guess in a way it is time travel, because you can walk and enter a new time once you cross a different barrier. But another great moment, it comes with part two. I don't want to say too much, but in part two, our protagonist is given an opportunity to essentially sacrifice someone in order to improve their own life. And she knows that she's probably sacrificing this person. I thought, please explore that a little bit more. Do we sacrifice people to improve our own lives and potentially save or improve other people's lives? I always think anything like that is great to read and try to, what would I do if I were in the character's shoes? But unfortunately, I think really that was all that I really, really enjoyed, because I did find that there were saying things that I was just really annoyed with. For example, this is a time travel novel, so the ending, I don't think a lot of people are going to like the ending, and I'm not going to spoil too much, but it is kind of hand wavy, like, it's time travel. Deal with it. I thought that was pretty annoying. But I also found, like, again, this book is in two parts. Part one, really enjoyed. If the whole book was like part one, I think it would be not quite a 5-star read, but pretty close to it. But part two, there is a complete tonal change, and I got a lot of whiplash from part two, where we have all these new characters, and our protagonist has changed a lot, and I don't think that was explored all that well. And it was again whiplash, and I did not think part two was really built up as much as I wanted it to. Part one was great. The ending of part one also great, and part two is like all this momentum that part one was building towards was just ripped away, and it took me a little bit to get back into part two. I do also want to say, like, again, I have a lot of issues with the ending, but towards the end there was also a complete tonal change where It felt like the Giver movie. If you've watched the Giver movie, it becomes, in a way, an action book in like the last 10%. And I did not like that. Again, the strengths of this novel come in part one, where it's really slow and purposeful, and part two did not feel as purposeful, and especially the last little bit where it just didn't. It felt like we didn't know how we wanted to wrap up this book, so we wanted it to be action packed. And I don't think that really fit what I was enjoying about this book. It was a little bit too fast paced. I can't believe I'm saying that. A book that was the pacing issues just came about because I really enjoyed the pacing in the first half, and then part two it was too fast. Normally that's not the case, but overall, I do think I will probably check out his next book whenever that is, because I do think he has potential as a writer. I just think he needed a little bit more time cooking this one up, to say what, something that my students would say. He needed to spend a little bit more time in the kitchen. I would give this book probably a B minus, maybe even a C plus, because I do have major issues about part two, and I will always say that I can love, half of the book as much as I like, but if I kind of struggle, or really struggle in this case, or just don't really enjoy an entire other half of the novel, that is fair in my mind to grade it a little harshly. But I don't think a C plus or a B minus is that harsh. I still enjoyed it. And again, I will check out his next novel. But that is my fantasy bingo square for published in 2024, hard mode. It needs to be a debut novel. I think the next square that I'm going for, I'm actually currently reading a book. It's like something, how to word it. The square is the book has to have like maps in it or any other notes. In hard mode, it has to have more than two things in it, like notes, an appendix, maps, or anything like that. Calendars. I'm reading a book. I'm not going to spoil it right now because it might be my next review. But hopefully I keep up with the fantasy bingo, because I think I count it. There's 25 squares. That should be 25 videos, because with fantasy bingo, if you review every single book, then you also accomplish the next step. There's the standard bingo squares, the hard mode, and then hero mode if you review everything. So that is my review of The Other Valley by Mr. Howard. I shouldn't say Mr. Howard. Let me remind myself. Scott Alexander Howard. He is not, MCU character. I can't remember which one that is. Don't judge me. But okay novel. I'll check out his next one. That's all I got for you today. Like, subscribe. Tell me if you're doing fantasy bingo. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.